Today, we're going to be discussing the Hippo defense. This was referenced in the Owens video, and basically you deploy the Hippo defense when white does not go knight c3. So when white doesn't go knight c3 in the Owens, when you're trying to play it, you play the Hippo. Also, if they do anything that confuses you, like f4, f3, knight d2, guarding the e4 pawn directly, or if you just don't want to play the Owens, you can always play the Hippo, and that is this structure right here. We can also add in a6. This is the full Hippo, committing on the sixth ring, not taking any control of the center or not full control of the center. And basically the rule of thumb is that white will get a space advantage. Now, yes, computers love space advantages. However, people ruin everything, so a person will take a great space advantage and tend to overextend. That's kind of the negative connotation of a space advantage. It's good until it's bad. When they create an overextension, they weaken the position. So the Hippo is a great opening to get good at positional chess, because when your opponent comes to you, you lock it and then you exploit the weak squares that they create from overextending. There are going to be nuances, but it is a very easy opening to reach. So if you want to improve your positional chess, I do recommend the Hippo. Perfect symmetry. These knights both being centralized. You can go over to the king side. You can go over to the queen side, depending on which way they castle. Very, very flexible opening. There are nuances. One being, let's say, for example, they go a4. Don't continue with what you would normally do. You got to throw in a6 now, right? Because if you don't, they're going to go a5, maybe a6, and put your bishop in jail. So you would go a6, and then if they push, you push. And you see if they push, you push. And now you're getting clamps, right? We're going to rotate over to f4. The more the position becomes locked, the closer to equality it's going to become. So a locked center benefits the person playing the Hippo. Another nuance would be, let's say they don't go a4. Let's say they go queen e2. Same thing. You don't want them to go bishop a6, so you go pawn a6. Same thing applies when they have a battery facing over to the king side. You'd go h6 with your rook still on h8. You're not going to be able to castle, right, if they have a battery, because then your rook would not defend the pawn anymore, so you'd lose it. But king f8 is, funnily enough, it's a good move. So the Hippo defense being so flexible, I believe I'm going to start it off with a game that I got that kind of shows the potential of the Hippo. Yes, white did not play well in this game, but it's kind of like old school grandmaster games. The margin of error was greater, so there's more to learn about the position, right? Because if one person is playing well and the other person is playing bad, it shows the true strengths of the opening. So I think this is going to be a good game to review. So you see, in this position, I could tell my opponent did not go knight c3, so I was like, okay, I'm just going to play d6 and turn it into a Hippo, because you can always do that. So bringing both my knights to the center of the board. Again, if they played a4, I would play a6. If they played queen e2, I would play a6 next move. They played rook e1. I still played a6, right? Because you're just trying to commit everything to the sixth rank. So I'm not going to say don't think at the start of the game, because there are cases where you'd rather go on the king side. Like, for example, if they played bishop g5, I would go h6, g5, gaining 2 tempi, and then focus way more on the king side. But if they're focusing on the queen side, I would push my a6 pawn. Typically, a lot of the times it doesn't matter, but if they're playing like a nuanced idea to attack either end of the flank, then it could matter. So my opponent went d5. What do you do when they overextend? You lock it. Very rarely do you trade. Typically you lock it because, again, the person playing the Hippo benefits from a locked center. Knight g5, a horrible move. I mean, I don't know why. Maybe they wanted to play f4 or something and try to collapse my center. We will go over f4 in the opening, because a lot of people don't like when they go like e4, f4, d4, c4, and it's just like, what is coming towards me right now? 4 pawns. So h6, kick the knight out. Queen h5, pinning the pawn, but then g6. He's like helping us get into the Hippo structure. So the queen has to move back. Yes, my pawn is pinned. Now it is unpinned, so the knight has to move. Again, I'm just rotating over to the king side. That's typically what you do in the Hippo. And now, positional question. How does black benefit from this locked center? What piece becomes worse when they go d5? If you're thinking the light squared bishop, you are correct, right? Because they have a pawn wall facing our bishop. So that once great Owens bishop is a horrible bishop. Where could this bishop be good? Look at this diagonal. c8. So much of the time when this happens, and it happens often, I do go bishop c8. Here it's very easy to tell because they have a queen on h3. But sometimes they have a pawn on h3. You still go bishop c8 because in the middle game you can sack to blow open the king side. But here it's easy to tell, bishop c8, hitting the queen. Queen has to move g5. Queen is trapped, right? If queen g3, knight h5, queen is trapped. So they tried to give up a piece to save their queen, but now we have the open g file, we have the open h file, and the queen still is not great. So bishop h6, queen only has one spot to move. After queen g3, knight h5, they resign. The queen is just trapped. So this is one example of the Hippo working very, very well. That is because they played very, very poor. But ideas apply, such as locked pawn structure, backwards bishop move, and attacking on the king side. Now we're going to talk about different setups they could do. So I'm going to throw in some moves. If you guys play the modern or the perk, you can get the Hippo from that. I sometimes play the Owens, and I based it off of my Owens opening, so I'm just going to base it off of us playing the Owens. So first I'm going to go over knight f3, not f4. We'll go over f4 after. So both sides just getting their pieces out. Again, if a4, what do? You go a6. Now c3, you can go h6 or g6. I like to go h6 first just because I like to play g5. I like to get the extended fianchetto because it gives black more space. It also controls f4, and I love controlling f4. So one example is, okay, let's say they're expanding on the queen side and bringing their pieces over. Here, for example, I would go pawn to g5, right? Their bishop, if it was on f4, it'd be even better. Here it's not on f4, but I'm still going to go g5. And the goal of this now is to play e5. If they take, always take with the pawn, right? Especially if their knight's on d2, because a trade is going to help them get their pieces out. So you want them to remain as cramped as possible because, let's face it, black is pretty cramped themselves. So you take back with the pawn, and look at this control you have over f4, right? It's a lot of control. So you rotate your knight over to g6, and then you plop a knight on f4. Very, very good. Sometimes even they go g3. I know that is hanging right now, so it's very bad. But just to show you, let's say you reached a position where this happened. Even if they take, you see the bishop is still trapped, and you get the open g file. So let's say nothing was hanging in that position. This is one idea where black would have an advantage, and it's an idea of a sacrifice on the king side. And don't forget bishop c8 to aim in on this diagonal or hone in on this diagonal. So that is one example. And it's very annoying to deal with this. You can then route your other knight over to f6, h5, and think of sacrificing a knight for 2 pawns and then planting your other knight into f4. So this is one example of a good Hippo. Sometimes the king goes to f8 just to get out of the center of the board, though here the king is pretty safe. If they double up, to avoid any trades, I'd go queen e7. Then you'd always have rook d8 at a moment's notice. So this would be an example of equality reached out of the Hippo. Now, something I know that people don't like facing, for example, is like pawn to f4. So people don't like facing pawn to f4, let's say. Knight f3, they don't like this massive space advantage that white gets, but it's not bad, right? If they go f5, you just take. And if they take, again, you're not really in any danger. I would just go knight f6, blockade their pawns, and you're probably going to castle queenside this game. Typically, they don't ever rush with f5 that early. So let's say they go here and you go g6. This would be a more common example. And now people like going f5. So what do? We have both pawns facing it. You could take with either pawn. Here is an example where you could take with the g pawn and aim in at their king. You get the open g file, right? e5, just try to lock it up. If you take with the e pawn and they take back, you could just go bishop g7. See, they don't really have much. Like, it looks scary, and it always looks scary when they're just pushing pawns at you, but it's not. So this would be an example, and they don't want to take, obviously. You take with the h pawn, and now you have a bunch of good pieces aiming in at their king. Now, another example that they could do is, let's say they go like this, and I think c4 would be pretty common. Kind of resembling like a king's Indian almost, I would say. Again, if d5, you just go e5. say bishop g5, h6, bishop h4, g5. You see kind of a similar idea that may be more common, right? Knight c3, just bishop g7. You can even go g4. G4 is another Hippo idea in the middle game, h5. See, this bishop, a lot of the time, it just gets stuck. But let's say they don't go d5 right away. Let's say they're trying to maintain the pressure. Again, if a4, what do? You go a6. Now, knight c3, g6 or h6. Typically, it doesn't matter. Say bishop g7, queen d2. This is another example. You don't want to castle because they're just going to go bishop h6. So you just go h6 yourself. Now, if d5, just e5, and you see we're reaching kind of the same ordeal. Say they go b4. This is an example of an overextension. They're pushing too many pawns. Here, you could continue with g5, but when they're weakening the queen side like this, make your dark squared bishop thrive. So like, for example, b takes, b takes. They can't really take here because after knight takes, you just have all the advantages, all the open lines. They have like a Maroczy structure, but we have Tufi and Ketoed bishops, so it works very well against that structure. Now, let's say they go, I don't know, e5. Maybe e5 is another example. Here, they're not really well versed to play this move. I would just play knight f5, right? Because when they overextend, they give up control of the f5 square. So bishop takes knight, g takes knight, and like rook g8 would be the idea. Putting an immense amount of pressure onto the king. Now, I'm trying to think of other things that could stem in the Hippo. Maybe this will be an intro idea to the Hippo. Yeah, let me know what you guys think. I think this covers a lot of the details, a lot of the little nuances. This video was harder to make than I thought because there's so many like possibilities that they could throw at you. But the general rule of thumb is when they overextend, lock the position, and then this f4 square is a massive liability to them. You'll plant a knight there. It'll be posted. You can even sack and trap the bishop with the open g file. If they're playing more to weaken the queen side, then you break with c5. So it's either going to be like c5 or e5, g5. I hope this helped. I hope I didn't confuse you guys. Let me know what you think and enjoy the Hippo. Thank you for watching.